Hello internet, and I'm back again with the Borne here to give you my end of the month wrap up for the month of April. So I read a lot of books this month. I finally finished my Goodreads goal, which was 120 books. I'm a little past that now, so 4 months in and I've already finished my Goodreads goal. Pat on the back for me. I think I'm doing amazing so far, but we're just going to jump straight into talking about the rest of the books I read in this month. I do have a part 1 wrap up, so if you're curious about what I read at the beginning of the month and what is kind of boosting the stats for this month, go check out that part 1. Also, a few of you asked, hey, could you have timestamps in your description box? So I will be adding timestamps down below on every book that I talk about and how long I talk about every book, because we all know that I could go on forever. So if that is something that you really invest your time in, you really want, go check out the description box. I'll try to have those there, and let's get started. So first we're going to talk about the stats of like, what are my end of the month stats? Now, in the grand total, I read a total of 23 things, and we're going to break that down further. So breaking down that 23, we have 17 books that I owned and 6 books that I borrowed. Technically, one of them is an anime, but I'm counting that because we're counting that. Now, 1 was on ebook, 6 were in physical copy, 15 were on audiobook, and like I said, that last one was an anime. Technically, it is 26 manga volumes, but since I just watched all of the seasons of Full Alchemist Brotherhood, I am just counting that as one thing, because we ain't bothering with all the other stuff, even though I did count every individual book on my Goodreads goal, because you know what? If I spent all my time binging the show, I'm gonna count it as something that I read. So there we go. Now we're going to start into the books that I read that I don't physically own, because we don't want to forget anything. So the first book we're going to talk about is Borne by Jeff Vandermeer. This is a book that I read for the BookTube SFF Awards. I read this on audio. Now, this book follows a woman named Rachel. She lives in like a post-apocalyptic world. She is a scavenger. She one day finds something that she thinks is a plant, but she ends up finding out it is an organic form of life that keeps growing and changing with time, and she ends up calling him Borne. I really didn't care for this book. I didn't think it was that good. However, I really did like the character of Borne. I found him extremely fascinating, and I was in love with him as a character. I think my biggest issue with this book in particular was the character of Rachel. I really wanted somebody else to be a companion to Borne, because Borne really needed someone who is a little more philosophical. Now, while Borne is super intelligent, I don't think he needed somebody with a high IQ to sort of match him in pace, but he definitely needed someone who could think outside of the box and more broadly, and Rachel just wasn't there for me and really didn't provide the sort of discourse I thought that Borne needed in his life, because he asked a lot of philosophical questions that you really need to think about, not necessarily having like a great answer to, but like an answer at all other than just because I said so. And Rachel did something at the end of this book I was not personally a fan of. I just don't like her character. I'm definitely having a Borne bias, but I think if there was some other main character, and perhaps if Borne got a little bit more time and it was more about Borne than it was about Rachel, I would have enjoyed the book more, because I definitely saw the potential for the type of story that I would have liked to consume there in that book. The second book that I'm going to mention is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doty. This is by a woman who also is a YouTuber. She does a series on YouTube called Ask the Mortician, where she talks about like death culture, what goes on in the death industry, and all those sort of things. So Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is her recounting in detail what happened when she was working at a crematory, the type of stories, the things that she learned. It was really fascinating, like morbidly fascinating. She goes into detail about like what happens to your body when it gets burned, like what kind of troubles you can have, like where do you go to get bodies so that you can burn them, how do people like take care of their dead, and what do you do, what can you do, how does cremation work, how does embalming work. You get all of these little tidbits. I really enjoyed this book. I have a morbid fascination with death and how people handle it. I think it's just a really interesting topic, so I definitely really like this book. the one thing that I didn't particularly enjoy about this book was the very ending. And I know I can't really criticize or like critique this woman's life since she is giving her stories and what she is seeing, but like towards the end when she leaves the crematory and like goes off to embalming school, it wasn't really that interesting for me anymore. I really just cared about the time in the crematory and what was going on there. So the ending wasn't as great, although how can I like critique your life and what you did, but I do think it is a very fascinating book if learning about the death industry and about death in more detail is something that fascinates you, which it is me. So yeah. Next we have Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin somebody. I know this is becoming a movie, so I wanted to read it. I know Squiggle Reads really loves this, so I was like, well, let's see what it's about. I really enjoyed it. This is about a girl. She is a professor along with her boyfriend in New York. Her boyfriend's like, hey, come to Singapore with me. Let's go meet my family. We can go to this wedding. It'll all be great. And she agrees. Only she didn't know that her boyfriend was one of the super rich. Like, he is one of the richest rich people that ever did rich around. And she has to deal with a lot of things coming with his family, who thinks that she is nothing but a gold digger. And I like this book. I thought it was very entertaining. There were a lot of things that happened in the course of this book where I was just like, wow, that must just be a rich people thing, because like they would be talking about like, hey, designer this, hey this, dropping names here and dropping names there. And I was like, I have no idea what any of those things look like, what they are, and what significance or what the price range is for any of that stuff. But I'm going to assume it's very costly and probably is worth more than my whole entire life, because that's just the essence of what it is. I really got involved in this series. I think I would have liked this more maybe as the movie, so I'm going to watch the movie because I did have a lot of fun with it. Or I would have enjoyed it more as a drama, like K-drama or J-drama or Chinese drama or some sort of drama. I think it would have done really well as a drama. I think Asian dramas are some of the best drama that I've ever seen, and this definitely held that as well. I just think it would have worked better visually for me than it did as a book. So I did like it. I just think it would have been better for me to be visually consumed, because sometimes I like drama, and Asian drama is always the best kind. They know how to do it spot on, and it always gets me enthralled. Next we have Borne the Nightingale. This was in two categories of the BookTube SFF Awards. This is something that I've heard everybody loves. Everybody loves Caitlin Arden's new book of the new series. It's like based on Russian folklore and fairy tale, and everybody just loves it. I thought it was pretty okay. I didn't hate it, but I also really didn't love it either. I thought it was fascinating, but it wasn't like the best book I've ever read. It follows a girl who she can see like spirits and like magical things, demons and like house spirits and stuff like that. She ends up finding out she is one of like a chosen one to try to help another demon fight his evil demon brother, because the evil brother is awakening and things are going wrong in her little village. It catalogs her life from the time she is born to the time that she deals with this evil demon and all this stuff. It has multiple point of views of all the siblings and the friends and like the neighbors and this priest dude who's kind of creepy in my opinion, and all this sort of stuff. I thought it was entertaining. I do think it really gives like that fairy tale folklore feel. I did think it was a good book. It just wasn't the best book for me, because it had a little bit too much historical fiction and a little too much misogyny for me. And I didn't think that it was like purposely trying to be like misogynistic. It was pointing out the misogyny of the time. But again, even when books use that to make commentary on it, that's not something I have a problem with. I'm all for that. It's just something that I don't necessarily find enjoyable, right? Like, I don't find other people being mean to other people because of their race, sex, religion, or anything like that something that really gets me a book orgasm. Like, it's not something I have a book hard on for. So that whole area, well done, well, very relevant to the story, wasn't my favorite thing, and I definitely did not like all the points of view. I thought I would have just preferred to have Vasilisa or Vasiana or whatever the main girl's name is. I would have just preferred to have her point of view and her talking to spirits and learning from horses and stuff like that. That would have been fun, but all the other point of views, while again I found them necessary, were not my favorite things, so I really didn't enjoy it as much as I think everyone else did, but I can definitely see why everyone else enjoyed it. Now on to books that I actually have in physical copy. First, we have Martha Wells' All System Down. This is the first book in the Murderbot series. This was on the short works of the BookTube SFF Awards. This was a really good book. It follows a murderbot, or what they call themselves, a murderbot. This AI programming who has just broken their programming a little bit, so they are more of a free thinker. All this AI really cares about is watching TV and humans leaving them alone. Of course, they have to help their humans on this mission because they and the humans are in really deep shit, so they have to figure out what's going on and like how to survive and how to ensure that their humans survive. I really identified with Murderbot because I thought they were a great character, because I feel like more AIs probably just care about like watching TV and humans leaving them alone than humans actually understand, because I feel like I personally just want that, so of course why wouldn't anyone else? Like, being around other people is pretty awkward, and I also really just like watching mindless programming and getting super invested in it. Next two books I read were Monstress Volume 1 and Monstress Volume 2. These are also part of the BookTube SFF. I believe Volume 2 is the one that was nominated under graphic novels. I really like this. I think this was a very complex graphic novel. It is definitely something not to go into if you have any trigger warnings for like abuse, cruelty, like morbid stuff, because like a lot of gross shit is implied and seen in this book. Also, if you're not ready for like intense fantasy, however, if those things are things that you are okay with in your books and being depicted and you can get through, then you'll probably like this. This takes place in a fantasy world where there are a bunch of different races going on. There is the human race, there is a race of sort of like animalistic type beings called ancients, and there is a hybrid race of humans and the ancients that are referred to archaics. And these three races all live in the same world. The humans are very purist. They hate the fact that archaics even exist and have been developing ways to use archaics and ancients' blood to further their own motives, like to live longer, for medicine, to kill other ancients and archaics, just basically really gross mutilative stuff that they do under their idea of witchdom. There is our main character, Micaiah, and she is on a path to try to find out why her arm is missing, what happened to her mother, and like sort of what's going on there. No, she knows why her arm's missing, but like what the thing is inside of her, because like there's this whole other plot of like dark gods and evil things, and like I said, I really need like probably a couple hours to try to explain the in-depth detail that goes into this plot. I do think it makes sense. I think it is something workable. I think it is something that you can enjoy and you can understand, but it is definitely something where you kind of just have to sit with it a little while and you're just like, oh, that leads to that, because it is a very complex world and story that it's not something that I can just go, here's one line synopsis that explains everything. So I did like these. Next we have The Apocalypse of Elena Mendoza by Sean David Hutcherson. This was my third Hutcherson book at the moment. I have read others. I actually have another one in this wrap-up. This was a fantastic book. I buddy read this with Darlene over at Hell's Moving Castle. She will be linked down below, so go check her out. We had a lot of fun discussing our theories for this. I will not be doing a book review of this book in particular, but more of a Sean Darker universe book review, because if you're not aware, Sean David Hutcherson has a whole end of the world type universe where a lot of his books are connected. So far, there are a few of them: At the Edge of the Universe, 5 Stages of Andrew Bradley, this book, and We Are the Ants. They all exist in the same universe. I think one of his upcoming books will also be taking place in this universe. So Elena Mendoza is kind of the Avengers of the whole universe, really pulling together a lot of little pieces from the other books and really bringing this universe together. So I have a lot of theories on how this whole thing connects, what this whole universe looks like, and I am doubly naming it the Shani Darko universe because, as Darlene puts it, this series really reminds her of Donnie Darko, and it is Sean David Hutcherson's Twitter handle, so we are therefore now calling it the Shani Darko universe. So I will be going more in detail on this book in that video where I talk about the whole universe, and that is where you'll get more of a book review on this. Of course, it's going to be spoilery, but if you just want a short and simple sweet, this book is really, really amazing. It is about a girl who is of virgin birth. She ends up being like the catalyst, or the supposed catalyst, for the end of the world. A lot of people are just being raptured away, and she has the power to heal people from like near-death experiences. So she is being told to go around and heal people, and all these people are getting raptured, and she's just like, what the hell is happening? How am I involved? She also has like personal problems to deal with, like a girl that she really likes, a best friend that she has to talk to, bullies, stuff like that. All the usual Sean David Hutcherson stuff that is done really well about like mental issues, about dealing with family, about relating to others, while also having this fantastic plot about end of the universe time and an apocalypse and like all that sort of stuff, and a lot of very great conspiracy fodder for me. So I am excited to talk about this more in depth later on. Next, we have Circus Mirandus by Cassie Beasley. This was a surprise of a book for me. I really, really loved it. This is about a young boy whose grandfather is dying, and his grandfather has told this kid all his life about a circus called Circus Mirandus. It's very magical. It's this amazing place, and one day the grandfather sends a message to the circus asking the circus to come to town so that his grandson can have a chance to go to the circus himself. So this whole book is very, very beautiful. It talks a lot about like how this young boy is dealing with his grandfather being sick and dying, especially since his grandfather is someone who he loves. So it really does have a very, very great story about like dealing with death and sickness and illness and stuff like that. It also has like great fantastical elements about this magical circus. It even has like a little bit of villainy, and I really wish the series had continued, because the person who is like the villain of this story is one of the best villains I've ever seen, because oh my gosh, she make the perfect villain. Like she is something else, and I really loved it. A lot of this story is told in backstory, talking about the grandfather in his life around the circus, and then about this young boy and him trying to deal with his grandfather's illness, and then his time at the circus as well, and him and his friend discovering the circus, all the things about it. I just think this is a beautiful book. It's really short, and I think it was a lot of fun. 5 stars. I really loved it, and I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. Next, we have Iron-Hearted Violet by Kelly Barnhill. This is about a girl who is a princess. She is not the most beautiful princess in the world, and she has been tutored by a storyteller all her life, and she lives in a world where there are gods, and one god was outcast for being like an evil trickstery god, and this god starts whispering out and trying to get the attention of a princess. There is a dragon in this book. It's basically just like a fairy tale, but breaks a lot of the normal fairy tale conventions, and it really points out like not all princesses need to be like drop dead gorgeous, and sometimes fairy tales can be really, really ridiculous, and sometimes it subverts your expectations. I really did like it. I thought it was pretty entertaining and fun for what it was. It wasn't my favorite book, but overall I had a pretty decent time. I think I was expecting something else, because I was expecting more about this girl and this dragon getting to be friends, but it was really more about like, hey, there are princesses and arrogant kings and evil magical, and like all of those great cliches that come along with like fairy tales and fantastical stories and fantasy stories all in one book. And I think it's well done. Like, that's not an insult on the book itself. It's just something like, oh, okay, that was pretty good. It was like a fairy tale. I really liked it. It was really good. It was okay. Like, I had a good time. I didn't hate it. That was good. Next, we have Throne of Jade by Naomi Novik. This is the second book in the Temeraire series. I talked about the first book, which is also called Temeraire or His Majesty's Dragon. This takes place during the Napoleonic Wars, and it has dragons in it. Like, that's the only difference. So here, dragons are used as an aviator force. There was a naval officer who finds an egg, who hatches into this beautiful dragon called Temeraire, and they are companions and friends. They are dragon and rider, and they are just great together. However, at the end of the first book and the beginning of this book, we find out that Temeraire is not just your average dragon, which you already got hints of, but he is a very special breed of Chinese dragon. So through the course of this book, the two are making their way to China to try to figure out how Temeraire and his naval officer friend can stay together. Again, the best part about these books are just really Temeraire. He is the best part. I really like his relationship with the naval officer and like all their talks, and like when they discuss things, it has really great conversation there. The action, again, isn't one of my favorite things when it comes to this series. I think the action would have done better if like I could visually see it, because it, like, again, it wasn't something that really got me hyped, but I did find the characters equally as fascinating and the world that they lived in equally as fascinating, because it was interesting to see how each individual was going to see and treat dragons, and then how these dragons are going to respond and think about things. So I did find that spot on and fantastic, and Temeraire is just one of the most precious things in the world, and I absolutely love him. So the next book is 5 Stages of Andrew Bradley by Sean David Hutcherson. This is the book that I was talking about that I also read, other than Elena Mendoza by Sean David Hutcherson. This is connected to the Shani Darko universe very strenuously. If you're interested in the Shani Darko universe, it's not necessary that you read this one, but it is referenced as being in the same world, and it really just kind of gives you some timeline things that you might have some interest in. But for this book itself, it is about a young boy, Andrew Bradley, and he has been living in a hospital after the death of his family, and it's kind of him dealing with death, dealing with mental issues, him talking to other people in the hospital, him working at the hospital, all of these sort of things, and then his potential with a relationship with a boy who comes into the ER, a kid named Rusty, who was set on fire. So we have a lot of drama going on. I do think this was a really, really good book. I ended up really enjoying it. I think at the beginning of the book, it was more of a 4-star read. It didn't quite hit it, but by the end of it, by God, I gave it a 5 stars by the end of this book. It gave me some feels. It was great. I found there was a little bit pacing issues, but I forgave it because I was like, well, this boy's probably been under a lot of stress, so I'm not going to fault him for his very rash decisions sometimes. This also has some comic pages, because Andrew has been drawing his own comic, a comic called Patient F, and this is sort of just Andrew's commentary on what it's like to like be in this hospital and stuff like that. So it also has that added benefit, and I thought, while the comic was a little bit confusing because I was just like, I don't know if I know what's going on, I did think it was a great additive to the story, especially like how the story progresses and how it all comes together. So I did really like this book. Next, I read Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This follows a girl named Molly. Her twin sister has begun a new relationship with this new girl that she met, and now Molly really feels the pressure is on to finally have her first love, because she has had a ton of crushes on other people, but has never really put herself out there to have a relationship. So I thought this was a really good book. I found it enjoyable. I liked the conversations. I liked Molly. She was a very relatable character. I didn't like her sister as much. I found her sister super irritating. While I understand her sister's just not the type of person that I'm overly fond of. But overall, I did like this book. I thought it had fantastic rep. I thought it had like a really diverse cast, so it just felt naturally diverse. It made some commentary that was like, yeah, spot on. Like, I think one of my favorite things was the fact that one of the Simon characters, Abby, who is the girl that Simon is blackmailed to try to set up a date with, she is actually cousins with the main character, Molly, and everyone's just like, oh, how could you be cousins, because you guys look completely different, let alone, like, you know, stuff like that. But I just liked how they were like, what does it matter what we look like? We are cousins, we are related to each other, it doesn't really matter. And that is something that I have, I like and I appreciate when it happens in books where the author is just saying, hey, stop making such a narrow view of what a family can be and like what relatives can be and like who you can count as family. So that was like a big theme in this book that I really enjoyed, outside of like all the love and the first love and trying to put yourself out there to get your heart broken, all of that sort of stuff. I think one of my favorite parts was just, a family can look like anything and still be a family, so just stop judging other people and what their families look like, because you just need to let them have their families and be happy, okay? Just leave them alone. Next, we have Scarlet. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles by Melissa Meyer. I didn't really like this book. This is a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood in the same universe. It also has multiple point of views, which Cinder didn't, so I'm assuming as the series goes on, the point of views grow, and oh my gosh, that is not something that I'm very happy about. I was thinking, hey, it's just gonna be Scarlet's point of view and the other characters will make like a little Easter egg appearance or something, but no, we get like everybody's point of view in this book. And while I see the value in that, it wasn't something that I had a really great time with. I also thought that Scarlet as a character was very, very similar in personality as Cinder. I don't want to make a one-to-one comparison, but they definitely felt like they came from the exact same roots. And I really didn't enjoy my time with this book as much as other people have. I didn't hate it. Don't get me wrong. There was just a lot of things in it that I was just like, ugh. That's why YA sometimes gets a bad rap. Like, there are some things that come with like classic YA and classic YA tropes that happen in this book that just kind of leave a bitter taste in my mouth, and that I really didn't appreciate that much. Next, we have Doctor Who, The Wheel of Ice. This is, of course, a Doctor Who book. This is by Stephen Braxton. This tells the story of the second Doctor and his two companions, this Scottish guy named Jamie and this girl from one of Earth's futures. What's her name? Zoe. And so those are his two companions. This takes place on the Rings of Saturn, the Wheels of Ice. It's Doctor Who stuff, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't my favorite. I have read other Doctor Who novels, specifically Shada by Douglas Adams. I think I prefer Douglas Adams' writing style when it comes to telling Doctor Who stories. I really just like that personality more. I've never watched the second Doctor, so I can't say how fitting this writing style was for the second Doctor, because I think Doctors previous were a little bit more serious, like a little bit, but you know, I like Douglas Adams' take on the Doctor a lot more, and the Doctor he was working with a lot more. This wasn't bad, just wasn't my favorite. And the last book I read is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. I know, this has been a long time coming. I know everyone else has read this book, but I finally have, because I finally got the audiobook. Sam over at Thoughts on Tomes just kept talking about how great the audiobook was, so I was like, no, gotta read this on audiobook. I finally came through on my library, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm sure all of you guys know what this is about. It's based on the Black Lives Matter movement. The main character sees one of her best friends be shot by a policeman, and it's just revolving around this whole incident, this whole case, and what's going on here of this horrible death and horrible murder of this young black man. So I really like this book for one reason. Like, there's tons of reasons I could go in, but the only reason I'm going to mention here is I like this book for showcasing the Black experiences. I think a lot of times people just like assume that like the Black experience is like a collective thing that everyone feels the exact same on, but it's a bunch of different experiences. So I like seeing this neighborhood of all these people who look this similar and come from like the same race, all having different opinions and different ideas of how this case and the death of Khalil should go and how it should be approached based on their experiences, on their backgrounds, how they were raised, how they think, their philosophies, all of that sort of stuff. And I loved seeing all of these different people and how they reacted to this experience based on like what types of lives they had, because like the Black experience is not the Black experience. There is a Black experience depending on the person you meet, and I like that was just really showcasing, hey, Black people are not a monolithic people. Everybody goes through their own thing, has their own experiences, and has a way of thinking about stuff. Like, we come together, but we all still have our own minds and how we think and converse about things. So I really, really love that, because Lord knows I am tired of every time something that has to deal with a minority in the topic, everybody's staring at me like I'm all of a sudden the spokesperson for like 2,000 races of people because I'm mixed. So like I got a few more races that I'm the stand-in for. And I'm like, stop looking at me. I am not the spokesperson for an entire race. I am one individual. So I liked how in this book we really just got to see a bunch of different people speaking out and sharing their experiences and stuff like that. And really just, it's something that I feel like people just need to know and acknowledge, like, of course, but like some people are just real thick and they probably need to read this book a couple times before they understand that lesson. So that is all that I read in the month of April. That was a lot of books. It was a lot of talking. So if you have any commentary on any of the commentary that I just commented on, comment down below. And if you like what you're seeing here and you want to see more, click all those bunnies, and goodbye, internet.